Chapter 6. At Giza. Very early one morning, not long after the flood began, Cafe ran down the path from the villa to the house where Sari lived. "Sari!" he called as he ran into the courtyard. "Sari, where are you?" "Here I am," said Sari, coming out of the house. "What's the matter?" Cafe had run so fast that he was out of breath. "Father is going to Giza, and he says that we may go with him," he panted. "Come on, we're going to start right away." When the two children reached the villa, Sokaris was just settling himself in the litter. They climbed in beside him. Nasha was standing in the doorway, waiting to wave goodbye to them. "Can't you come too, Mother?" asked Cafe. "Not today," answered Nasha. "I have too much to do here. You will have to remember everything you see and tell me all about it when you get home and," she added, "take care not to wander off and get lost again. I've had enough to worry over you two lately." "We won't," promised the children. And with that, the slaves lifted the litter to their shoulders and set off quickly toward the gate and the temple road. They passed the field where they had so nearly got caught in the flood. There was no field there now, for it was all under water. From the dike it looked as though the whole world was flooded. Villas and villages rose above the water like islands, and dikes stood up like ridges, but everything else was covered with reddish-brown water right up to the edge of the yellow cliffs that Cafe and Sari had tried so hard to reach on the day that they had pretended they were sand people. Sari looked out over the valley as the slaves carried them swiftly along past the temple and out on the road to Memphis. "Egypt is very flat, isn't it?" she asked Cafe. "I don't know. Is it?" he replied. "Yes, in our country there were mountains in some places, and the land was all hilly and uneven." "What are mountains?" asked Cafe. "Why, great high piles of rock that go up and up to points against the sky." "Oh, I know," said Cafe. "We have them too, only we call them pyramids. The pharaohs build them for their tombs." "Nobody builds mountains," said Sari. "They're just there." "How can that be?" began Cafe. But Sokaris interrupted him. "Sari is right, Cafe. There are mountains in her country, and they are not pyramids. They are like the cliffs there at the edge of the desert, only much higher. The copper that we use comes from some of them." "Oh," said Cafe. "Well, anyway, a pyramid is something like a mountain, isn't it?" "Well, something like it," admitted Sokaris. "You'll see one when we get to Giza," Cafe told Sari. Sokaris pointed out over the flooded fields. "You can see it right now," he said, and there, far off on the edge of the desert to the north, was the tip of the pyramid that Khufu, the pharaoh of Egypt, was building. "Does it look like a mountain, Sari?" asked Cafe eagerly. "Not very much from here," she answered. Then, seeing that Cafe was disappointed, she said, "But maybe it will when we get a bit closer." "It does look pretty small now," said Cafe. "It is because it is so large that we can see it from way off here," said Sokaris. "No pharaoh has ever built a pyramid as big as the one that Khufu is building." "It has taken a long time to build it, hasn't it, Father?" asked Cafe. "Yes, indeed, almost 16 years, with 100,000 men working on it every year at flood time. And it is not finished yet," answered Sokaris. "But why do they work on it just at flood time?" asked Cafe. "Oh, because it is easier to float the stone across the river from the quarries when the land is flooded," answered Sokaris. "And besides, the slaves are needed for farming the rest of the year." "That's right," said Cafe. "I forgot. Some of our slaves went to Giza last week to work on the pyramid, didn't they?" "Yes. Khufu ordered me to send them." Even noblemen's slaves were drafted for work on the pyramid if Khufu needed them. The litter jogged on and on along the dike, through the city of Memphis, then out on the dike again. They began to pass groups of slaves, like those from their own farm going to work on the pyramid. They saw others who were staggering toward Memphis with bandaged arms or legs or bloody backs, worn out and injured from helping to heave the heavy blocks of stone into place. But all of them tired and ill, or, well, some were strong, bowed to the earth as Sokaris' litter passed them. Now the children could see the pyramid rising high above the yellow desert. Its top was smooth and finished, but the lower part was black with workmen. Soon they entered the new city that Khufu had built near his tomb. It was almost as large as Memphis. The streets were alive with people hurrying to and fro, as though what they were doing was very important. They passed the shining new palace and unpainted mud brick houses where the workmen lived. Then they went on, out into the country again, toward the sandy desert and the Great Pyramid. It loomed higher and higher above them until at last Sari said, almost in a whisper, "It does look like a mountain, Cafe. A great steep mountain that no one could ever climb." But Cafe did not answer. He was too busy looking. They rounded a corner of the pyramid and came to a standstill in front of its eastern side. Here the stonework was finished almost to the bottom, and slaves were already laying the foundations for a T-shaped temple, where, after the pharaoh's death, people would come to worship his soul. This was what Sokaris had come to see. Their slave set down the litter, and followed by Num, Sokaris walked over to the place where the temple was to be. Cafe and Sari stayed near the litter. No one paid any attention to them, but they were so busy watching the workmen that they did not mind. From the edge of the valley to the top of the desert cliff where the pyramid was being built ran a smooth stone runway. Up it struggled hundreds of slaves with ropes tied around their waists, dragging behind them wooden sleds with great blocks of limestone. Every time the sled moved, there was a grating, screeching sound. Mingled with that were the groans of the slaves, the shouts of the overseers, and the crack of their whips on the slaves' bare backs. The slaves working on the sides of the pyramids groaned too, as they pushed the huge stone blocks into place. There were so many people and so much noise that it reminded Cafe of bees swarming about some strange new beehive. By the time Sokaris had come back, the children were almost dizzy from watching everything and from looking up near 500 feet to the top of the great stone pile. They were also bursting with questions. "Father," cried Cafe as soon as he saw Sokaris, "where will they put Khufu's body when he dies? Does it go under the pyramid? How do they even get it there?" "No, not under it. In it," said Sokaris, smiling. "It is hard to believe, isn't it, that there are passageways and rooms inside?" "What? But how does anyone get in?" asked Cafe. "I don't see a door anywhere." There is one, though," Sokaris told him. "Where?" both children asked. "I don't know," said Sokaris. "That is a secret. Khufu doesn't want anybody to know where the door is, for someone might try to get in and steal his treasures. Someone might even try to steal the jewels from his body after he dies." exclaimed Cafe. "But that's a horrible thing to do, isn't it? To steal from the dead?" "Indeed it is," answered Sokaris, "but there are people who do it. We have all built false passageways and false doors in our tombs and have made the real ones hard to find so that tomb robbers can't get in. Would you like to come with me to see my tomb?" he added. "I want to find out how much the workmen have done." He said this just as if it were inviting someone to his house, and that is just what he was doing. Every Egyptian nobleman began to build his tomb when he was quite young, for he wanted to have a house all ready for his soul to live in when he died. Since his soul would have to live in this house for a very long time, much longer than his body would live on earth, he had to be very careful to make the tomb beautiful and to put into it everything that his soul would need to make it happy. There were bright pictures painted on the walls, and splendid furniture, and jars of food and wine, and jewelry, and all sorts of treasures. Whatever anyone wanted to have with him after he died, he put into his tomb. The pharaoh had more things in his tomb than anybody else, but noblemen like Sokaris had many treasures in theirs too. So Sokaris and Cafe and Sari got onto their litter again and set out to see Sokaris's tomb. Off in the desert near the pyramid, the children could see a great many little stone buildings built in rows, but they were not like pyramids. They were flat-topped with sloping sides and a doorway in the middle of one wall. They were called mastabas. These were the tombs of the nobles, and the one that Sokaris was building was quite close to the pyramid, which showed that Khufu liked him very much. No one could build his tomb at Giza unless Khufu told him that he could, and only the people he liked best were allowed to build close to his pyramid. They stepped out of the litter at the door and went outside. Then they went over to the door and went inside. The workmen must have worked very hard, for the walls of the rooms were all smoothly plastered, and now a man was painting pictures on them. Across the room from the door was painted something that looked like another doorway. Above it was painted Re, the sun god, with his bright wings, just as the children had seen him in the courtyard of the temple at home, and on either side of his strange door was painted a tall guard with a spear in his hand. "Is that a real door?" asked Sari. "No," answered Cafe. "That is the door through which the father's soul will go to the world of the dead." They began to walk around the room, looking at the pictures. They were painted in strips on the wall, so there was room for a great many of them. "Why," said Sari, there is you, father!" And there on the wall was a painting of Sokaris in his big carved chair with a tiny slave kneeling before him. "Why has the painter made your father so big and the slave so small?" asked Sari. "Because father is a very important person and the slave is not important at all," explained Cafe. "Oh," said Sari. There were pictures of the villa, and pictures of slaves sewing and harvesting, of women working at their looms, and pictures of feasts, and pictures of hunts in the papyrus marches. Pictures even of the animals, Nep and Soot and Red Boy among them. And there was still one whole wall not even started yet. That gave Cafe an idea. "Father," he called across the room to Sakaris, "can't the painter put a picture of Sari and me on the wall?" Sakaris and the painter with whom he was talking smiled. "Perhaps he could," said Sakaris. "I have not decided what to put there. I shall have to think about it. It is time now for us to go back to the city. We must have our lunch, and I must see about the things that Khufu is having made for his pyramid." "My," said Cafe as they got into the litter, "this has been an exciting morning." But he never guessed as he said it that the afternoon was going to be more exciting still.